Hi everyone, Tom Slivick. This is going to be our final segment with Todd Riebe on realignment, where it is today. Todd, is there anything you want to maybe add to or from what we were talking about in that last segment?
Well, one of the things that realignment, if it's a success, we're going to have a lower recidivism rate. So we need to measure recidivism.
Okay.
And we're in the process of trying to come up with a definition of recidivism right now in the state. One thing we do know, that there's been an increase statewide of 2.8% in the commission of violent crimes and 6.9% rise in property crimes. The police that were interviewed during this study says that realignment puts more offenders with a record of property theft on the streets sooner, and that's why you've seen your property crimes increase. Also, because of the budget crisis, a lot of communities are reducing their police force, and they're simply not investigating some of the lower level property crimes. If they're not investigating them, that means they're not being prosecuted because they're just not getting done. Sacramento, for instance, the DA's office there, suspects who commit certain theft crimes and low level drug offenses, they're just not being charged right now. So as we deal with this going forward, it's clear that there's going to have to be some changes in realignment. Our local jails were not meant to house people for 24 years or 14 or 5. They're meant for short-term periods of time pre-sentence and for short sentences. We're simply not equipped in any way, shape, or form to deal with the same population that the prisons dealt with.
So would that put a movement to try to upscale, if you would, county jail prisons?
Well, where's the money going to come from?
Well, I mean that was what got us the problem in the first place. Is this not true? We didn't want to build more.
What ended up getting us in the trouble was the inadequate mental health and medical care delivery system in the prisons. And interestingly enough, we have 4 counties now that have been sued for delivering deficient medical care, allegedly, to the inmate population that are housed in their county prisons. So the same issues that the state of California face, which got them in trouble with the 3-judge panel and the overcrowding situation in the first place, are now trickling down to the local level. So this is what Joan Petrocelli recommends. And I think you can look for this coming out of Sacramento in the next year.
Let's hear some of these recommendations.
She says because these county jails aren't equipped to deal with this population for the extended periods of time, we need to cap sentences at 3 years. If it's more than 3 years, you serve it out in a state prison. 3 or less, you can serve it out in the county prison. Ex-offenders with serious or violent records need to be supervised by state parole agents, not county probation. That's a more sophisticated, criminally sophisticated population. The state should deal with that. That's her recommendation. We need to have a tracking database for those who are on probation supervision so we can track whether or not we're being successful with that population. And then lastly, parolees who repeatedly violate the terms of their release should go to state prison and not county jails, because when they go to the county jails, they're often released right away. So there's very little consequence as a result of their violation. And the whole thing is sort of like a carrot kind of stick approach. And I think the recognition from the criminal justice folks that were spoke to during the study was there has to be consequences. If there's no consequences, you're not going to have any kind of meaningful impact in the reduction of crime or changing behavior. So these are the things that you can look to come out of Sacramento, I think, in the next year. We have some very real pressing needs, and I think that the legislature is going to have to address them.
Okay, there's a, what about, the split, what do we call that? What do you call it?
Split sentences?
The split sentences. But it seems like there's another aspect of the realignment, which was to, I guess, to keep the inmates not the inmates, but the criminals not in jail, maybe at all, but doing more things that might help them not be criminals, I guess, is the simplest way to put it.
One of the things Realignment did was it changed the sentencing structure. It allows for something that it's commonly referred to as split sentences. It means some of your sentence can be served inside, and this is a prison sentence, and the rest of it can be served on post-release community supervision, okay, or local supervision. So the probation department would monitor. You're technically in custody, but you're not in the confines of a jail. Some counties utilize it quite frequently. Other counties utilize it not at all or less frequently. We're sort of a hybrid. The policy in my office is that we recognize that is a tool that right now, given the state of the sentencing laws, that can be helpful. And for certain people, it maybe gets them to turn the corner and not recidivate. But we don't have the information when we enter into a plea agreement as to how much time they should spend inside versus how much time should they be on post-release supervision. So if it's 5 years or less that they're facing for a local prison sentence, I want to get that probation report. They're going to interview the offender. They're going to look at the social history, the job training skills. They're going to take a look at the criminal history. And we're going to have a much better picture of that individual than we do at the onset. Okay. And so that's our policy. We're not saying no to it, but we are saying we're not going to agree to a certain period of time without all the information in front of us.
Okay.
And it's a hybrid kind of approach that some of the counties have been adopting.
It seems like a wiser approach to me, or at least, looking at it and taking some facts and getting some information and then acting on it, rather than somehow you come in and this is what we...
There's nothing that says it has to be a 50-50 split. I think a lot of counties that's the way that they do it, but it could be a 75-25 split. It could be a 60-40 split. And, once we get all that information in front of us, how they performed on parole or probation in the past, their criminal record, we're in a much better position to be making those decisions.
Are other states looking at California and wondering about our experiment here?
I think they're thanking themselves that they're not us. They're looking at it. This is the biggest criminal justice experiment in the United States. And whether or not this is successful means a lot to whether or not these kinds of ideas will go forth or catch on in other communities across the country. Like I said, we're ground zero. It hasn't been done at this level ever. Last year, 51% of the reduction in inmates incarcerated across the United States, in prisons and jails across the United States, 51% were California inmates. We were responsible for 51% of the entire country's reduction in prison population and in jail population. And that's a result of realignment.
So we're really moving the statistics around here.
We're really moving the statistics around. We do not incarcerate the most folks anymore. That belongs to Texas. Realignment has resulted in almost 51,000 less inmates than we had a couple years ago. And that's going to continue for the foreseeable future.
Well, the thing that boggles my mind is that we've got a reduction, but we don't have a reduction in crime. So how do we? And crime's on an uptick. It didn't seem quite as big, but 2%, 6%. But that's a big number if you're a victim. And how do we look at that? Put that on the equation. It doesn't seem to
well, you seized on something. I would like to see being lost in the shuffle is, with all this focus on inmates, is what about victims? Can we put that attention, can we put that kind of energy that we've put into dealing with the inmates in the state prison system in our county jails, can we put some of that energy towards the people that they victimize? Lost in the shuffle has been victim rights and making victims whole. And I think we need to not forget that part of the equation too. And sometimes I think they get lost in the shuffle.
Yeah, I think your job is to prosecute people to the full extent of the law, and on the other end, keep all of the citizens, all of their rights to be protected. Is that the dual role that you have?
It's to mete out fair sentences. Sometimes that may be the fullest extent of the law. In other cases, that may not be. But certainly, and it's in the California Constitution, victims have the right to, they have certain rights. One of them is to any out-of-pocket expenses that they get an order for that to be repaid. Sometimes it is repaid, sometimes it's not. Often it's not, just because of the status, the financial status of the perpetrator. They're not in a position to repay it.
Okay, well, we have to go. We're glad you were able to come by and
Thank
fill us
you.
in on all this. And it's still not going to be gone away, is it? Very quickly.
I think it's the new reality, and you know, right, wrong, or indifferent, it's here, and we're living in it, and we need to try to make it work.
Is it out in the open as much as you think it should be, or is this maybe not covered as much as should be?
I don't think people understand realignment. I think that
Okay.
it's difficult to understand it.
It is.
And I think that we're just coming to, one thing we do understand is if the crime rate goes up. And if the crime rate's going up, we need to find out why. And if it's because of this grand experiment called realignment, then we need to tinker with it to make it work so we can get that crime rate to go down.
I seem to think, and we've got to run, but it has something to do with, I'm not quite sure what the mission is anymore.
Comply with the judge's order.
And mission. Okay, there we go. All right. Well, thanks, Todd, for coming by. Todd Riebe, our district attorney. Thanks for watching TSPN. We'll catch you again next time.
You're watching Amador County's #1 news and sports leader, TSPN.